Welcome back. Well, it's the great mystery all expectant parents experience, whether they're having a baby boy or a baby girl. While many are content to leave it to nature, what if you could choose the gender of your unborn child? Australia's peak medical council has banned parents using IVF to choose the sex of their baby, while fertility experts pushing for change say parents should have the option of gender selection. It is always a controversial topic, and we hit the streets to get your thoughts on it.
No, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or girl, so it makes no difference to me, really.
I think normally we would never have that choice, and why should we change that?
If they want the option, then yes, why not?
Not necessarily for the first child, but when you've had several children, maybe.
If people want to use it, then yeah, but I'm not. I'm sort of opposed to it.
You're really lucky to have a child, so whether it's a boy or a girl, it's a child.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
Oh, I think they should have the option, yeah, but I don't know if I'd do it myself.
We also asked viewers on Facebook if gender selection should be permitted in Australia. 26% of you said yes, while a resounding 74% said no. So for today's agenda, I am joined by senior fertility expert Professor Michael Chapman and IVF expert Dr. Rick Gordon. Good morning to you both.
Morning, John.
All right. Now, Rick, obviously gender selection is illegal in Australia, but there are some exceptions. Who can access it currently in our country?
Well, if there's a medical condition that's attached to one sex or the other, then we find that's a medical indication for sex selection. Nobody wants to have a child that's born with a particular sex-linked disease. So that's the only form of sex selection that's allowed. If you wanted to get rid of a particular disease in your family line, then we can assess that in an embryo and not put those embryos back.
How common is that?
Oh, pretty rare for a start. It does crop up, of course. The more common one that everyone's talking about is the social sex selection, where they would just like to choose for no other reason but what sex they would prefer.
And just explain, if you could, Michael, how that works.
When we create an embryo, we have the ability to sample 5 or 6 cells from that embryo and then genetically test those cells for the sex of the child.
So did you understand that? In other words, what you're doing is you're taking a couple who could normally conceive a child at home through the old-fashioned method, and you're saying, no, for us to predict the sex of your child, we need to now convert you to an infertile couple and put you through IVF. We need to give you drugs, we need to collect your eggs, we need to make the embryos, then we need to assess them. So from what you used to do naturally at home, we're now going to convert you into an IVF
All right,
patient.
put your case. I know you're vehemently opposed to it.
Not vehemently opposed. I'm just trying to put the brakes on that this should be widely available, that's all. Speaking as an individual, right? This is a personal opinion, and I stress that.
OK, so, Michael, the typical couple who might do this want a bit of balance in an already established family, usually, I'm assuming. So perhaps they already have 3 boys and they want that 4th child to be a girl. Would that be the common scenario?
That's the common scenario that I'm approached with by couples who won't have another baby unless they can choose the sex. They've got their 3 boys or 3 girls and they want the opposite sex. And that's where I think the technology that we have, the technology we've developed, should be able to be used in that particular situation under strict controls.
What's wrong with that, Rick?
So 3 boys, you said, and then they want a girl? What about 2 boys and now they want a girl? What about 1 boy and they just want to predict, they want to have the balanced family? Where do you draw the line? The slippery slope argument.
Well, slippery slope argument, we wouldn't... Rick and I wouldn't be sitting here if we believed that we should stop at the worrying about slippery slopes. That in 1978, when the first baby was conceived with IVF, it was said to be this is the beginning of the slippery slope of designer babies. Now we're producing 13,000 babies, 4% of all births in Australia, from the technology that we've been able to develop. This is just one step further.
So we're talking about drawing a line in the sand, really, how much the society is prepared to accept the use of this particular technology.
Because the slippery slope you're referring to is then does it become a case of you walking in and saying, OK, we've already established I can have a boy, but I want a tall boy and I want a dark-haired boy.
No, you want a red-haired boy, you was what you meant
Of course, I'm married to a redhead. What was I thinking?
Sorry, yes.
I want a red-headed boy. I mean, you know what we're talking about.
Yes.
Are we edging closer to that? And as Rick says, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, well, I think the society does have to draw the lines. Your program today reflected what the general population actually does say in polls about sex selection. But the general population aren't the individuals with those 3 children who won't have another child. The family who, having had 3 girls, had a boy and he walks into the swimming pool and drowns at the age of 2, they want a boy to replace him. I think the technology is there. Well, we know the technology is there. We should be able to use it.
Demand has increased rapidly, Rick, apparently just in the last sort of 10 years. And as we say, it's not available currently in Australia, so people are having to go overseas. Explain that whole process.
Well, I think that's one of the arguments that would be put forward, saying, well, people are going off and having it overseas. Why shouldn't we provide that service here, that we can regulate it, control it and offer a higher level of medical care, perhaps? So that's the old inject the room. We know people are going to inject themselves with drugs. Let's give them somewhere safe to do it. So just because people go overseas to have a particular medical procedure doesn't necessarily mean we should be providing it here. But I can see the argument for saying, well, we can do it better for them here and save them the cost and angst of going overseas.
How often are you approached for gender selection?
Probably once a month.
And what's the process? Do you sort of counsel people through it, or how does it work?
So, well, what I'm saying to them, no, I'm terribly sorry that at this moment in time, it's not possible in Australia. The NHMRC guidelines say no, and in some states there's actually legislation saying no. There are some states where it's not illegal, but we have to follow guidelines.
And there is a potential loophole, isn't there, where people can perhaps, in certain states, do it?
But they would still be contravening our accreditation process and they would lose their licence.
OK. Do you see the guidelines being relaxed?
Well, certainly in the last debate that the NHMRC had, who are the people that set the guidelines, it was certainly not a unanimous decision. And so I think it is changing. And like many things in society, attitudes change over time. You know, IVF is now a medical treatment. It was an experiment 15 years ago.
All right. Last word from you, Rick.
No, I agree with Michael. I think the pendulum is swinging. I think the society is now looking at this with a different attitude, and the pendulum is definitely swinging towards accepting this particular technology. I'm just there to say it should be swinging a little bit slower than Mike's pushing it, that's all.
All right. Well, it is a really interesting discussion.
Absolutely.
And always gets a lot of discussion happening from our viewers. So thank you both for weighing in on it.